some headphones and equipment and everything but football is getting spiked yesterday for Big Ten and Pac-12 fans. The college football continues to be the top story for the NFL because the NFL needs to know what's going on. We all need to know what's going on with college football.
Yep.
The Big Ten and the Pac-12 postponed their seasons on Tuesday, but at a time when two of the Power 5 conferences decide to wait until spring at the earliest, SEC and ACC not canceling the seasons yet, Chris. And look, they may have to at some point. They may have to eventually surrender to their inability to contain and control the virus on a conference-wide scale. Maybe one school can, another school can't.
Right.
Then they start intermingling and it becomes an outbreak type of a situation. But for now, SEC and ACC planning to go forward. The one that's kind of hanging out there is the Big 12.
Right.
And I don't know how much of a swing it really is. If the Big 12 decides to postpone, does that get the ACC and the SEC to stand down? I don't know. Let's look at what some of the powers that be had to say, though. Big Ten Commissioner Kevin Warren, and I think this is an important statement from him. It became abundantly clear that there was too much uncertainty regarding potential medical risks to allow student-athletes to compete this fall. Chris, that gets back to the concern that there may be some long-term heart problems associated with the COVID-19 infection that people don't understand enough about. So if you play and you expose your players to those risks, you're potentially going to be on the hook from a liability standpoint for exposing them to the risks and having those heart problems develop later.
Yeah, well, I think, what you're seeing there from a guy like Kevin Warren, doesn't want that on his conscience. He doesn't want to deal with that and put people, in a spot where they could struggle for the rest of their life. And yes, there's so much unknown still. This is still, early stages of this virus and what it does to you long term, even like the short long term. We're still not even sure about that. So, yeah, I mean, to me, it goes back to that and short long term. Did that make sense? I know it.
No, it's fine.
But also, I always think of the liability aspect.
Not to be confused.
The short term?
The long short term.
The short term, maybe.
The long short term
right.
and the short long term. I'm not sure which is which.
I think
if
you
you're
got
taking those parking options at the airport, I'm not sure which one is cheaper.
Yes.
Short long term or long short term. But either way,
it's in between. You got my point. But yeah, I think, between that and then, Mike, I go back to something you've said. You're smarter than me, and you kind of said this right from the start. The future liability concerns, that's real. I got to think that's, in the brains of some of these guys who maybe have a little bit better, business acumen as far as what to expect and everything like that. And I'm sure that scares, the powers that be in the Pac-12 and the Big Ten.
And it's important to set this up the right way because we now have the ammunition to do so. We have Kevin Warren's statement where he referenced potential medical risks to allow the student athlete to compete in the fall. Oregon President Michael Schill, our decision was guided by science and a deep commitment to the health and safety and welfare of our student athletes. And then comes the SEC Commissioner, Greg Sankey, saying in his statement, I look forward to learning more about the factors that led the Big Ten and the Pac-12 leadership to take these actions today. Yes, you should learn more about the factors because here's the problem now, Chris. If the ACC and the SEC and possibly the Big 12, and there was a report last night the Big 12 intends to go forward. But, I intend to do a lot of things, and I'm not eventually going to do it. It's one thing to say we want to do it. It's another thing to actually do it. If 2 or 3 of these conferences go forward in the fall, and there is some sort of litigation that emerges if players become ill, if players' family members who are infected by the player become ill or die, one of the arguments, and it may not even have to be spoken, it may just kind of hover over the litigation and ultimately hover over the courtroom and eventually infiltrate the jury room. The mere fact that 2 major college football conferences decided it wasn't safe to go forward may be all you need when it's time to check the box on the verdict form for responsible or not responsible, guilty or not guilty. Right? Liable or not liable. Hey, the Big Ten and the Pac-12 realized it's not safe. And this lawsuit, the fact that these individuals who have brought this litigation were sickened or worse by the virus, and it can be traced to the fact that these colleges decided to go forward in the SEC and the ACC and maybe the Big 12, it makes it a hell of a lot easier to lose.
Yeah, definitely.
And lose big.
Right.
And we don't. It's this unknown liability. You don't know how many people are going to come to the table. We don't know. And this is what we talked about yesterday. And I've seen some feedback from people who don't really understand the legal system and some people who think they do. Just because, and let's be clear on this, the typical negligence lawsuit, you have to show failure to comply with a reasonably prudent standard of care. Somebody doing something stupid, that lays the foundation. But you have to connect somebody doing something they shouldn't have done to the injury that happens. And causation is the key. Proximate causation is the buzzword in the legal system. But I could see the law as it relates to COVID-19 evolving to the point where, because this thing is everywhere, you're not required to show that you actually caught it going to this football practice, participating in this game, bringing it home to that family member. That chain, I don't think, is going to be as demanding as it is in other cases. And I think it's going to be enough by the time these different courts in different states and different jurisdictions understand what's fair and just. Hey, you set up a spreading event without the proper safeguards at a time when you should have known that you are exposing people to this risk. And we're not going to require the person who got sick because they participated in your activity to prove that they didn't get it anywhere else.
Yeah.
If you can prove they got it somewhere else, fine. That's an affirmative defense.
But you won't have to prove that you got it there as the person that's doing the accusing. That would be just my question to you there.
If I'm Kevin Warren, the Big Ten commissioner, if I'm the Pac-12 commissioner, if I'm the president of any of these universities, if I'm anyone in any position to care about the long-term balance sheets of these organizations, I am factoring in the possibility that by the time it's all said and done, that person who showed up for this event that can be proven doesn't meet the reasonable safety standards that should have been in place, that you're not going to have to show that the molecule entered my nose or my eye because I was there. Because how in the hell are you ever going to prove that?
Yeah, right.
Right?
Right.
How are you going to prove that?
Yeah.
So I think that's why. And look, here's the thing.
Here, wait, one more thing.
Here's the thing. Let me just say one thing. I think it's funny. That non-lawyers and lawyers alike who think they understand how this all is going to play out believe that they can convince the commissioners and the presidents to not worry about it simply because they're saying so on social media. That part of it's funny to me. Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, no, it is. But okay, so here's a question for you, all right? Because this is totally spitballing, not even trying to go political here at all, but there is some crossover, so I got to hit it here. Now, the guidelines, the things that are put in place, all right, you're talking about the things that you and I know that, certainly seems somewhat common sense right now to stop the spread of the virus and all of that. That hasn't necessarily been relayed to the rest of the country, okay? And where I get into this is we have leadership, the president and other people who are certainly saying other things. Would that bolster the cases of the SEC and ACC to be like, listen, we know the CDC might be saying this, but the president said that? Would that legally help them? That's
no.
You don't think so?
No, because look, here's eventually there will be crafted a standard of what was expected.
Yeah, okay.
What was a school expected to do? What was a business expected to do? And you will be expected to have cut through the fog and made reasonably prudent decisions on how to properly take care of the people who are entrusted to your care. And that's where the duty may be even a little bit higher. It's one thing, to say we have a business that's open, whoever wants to come can come. It's another thing to say we've got a school where these kids come here and they are, entrusted to our care. I mean, but regardless of that, because I don't want to get too far into the shifting duties that may apply.
Right.
But there will eventually be a standard. And it may be one standard in California, one standard in Texas,
That's
one
what
standard
it sounds
in Florida,
like.
one standard.
Yeah.
Right? Or there could be a national standard as to what you have to show. But usually what happens, cases like this get resolved and determined one at a time. And the precedent from one case becomes relevant to the next case. And through that, one case after another case after another case, you develop a body of law that lawyers, that's what we do. We try to understand what that is, and we try to figure out whether or not the facts of a given case fit within that precedent. It's a very complicated, ugly process where it's not nearly as formulaic as you would think.
Yeah.
There's no calculator you use, and it's all determined one case at a time. But I could see over time, and you still see commercials on TV for asbestos litigation, right? That's been hanging around forever. Every once in a while you find this one thing that explodes into a nationwide, industry of lawsuits, and whether it's the weed eater cases that you see that advertised on TV. I mean, this could become a huge subset of the broader legal industry.
If you've been ripped off by the coronavirus, call Florio and Florio.
But now I don't want to make light of it.
I know,
because this is serious from a business standpoint. This is serious from an individual standpoint. And let me just make this point, because this leads into another angle that could solve the problem for some of these colleges in one fell swoop. The legal system is there to put guardrails on what American business would otherwise do. And people like to complain about lawyers and the legal system, and every frivolous lawsuit is the lawsuit that was filed against me, right? That's the reaction.
Yes.
Anytime someone gets sued, they say it's frivolous. No, look, you put those guardrails on what businesses are allowed to do and not do, and it forces them to be safe and prudent and to give a crap about their fellow man,
right?
Because there's a price tag if you don't give a crap about your fellow man.
Sure.
You take those guardrails off, Chris.
Yeah, who the hell knows what happens?
And then you're at the mercy of the ethics or lack thereof of somebody who looks at it and says, well, we could do it this way and it would be safe, or we could do it this way and we could save a hell of a lot of money.
Yeah, right.
Let's do it this way.
Right.
There's no reason to not do it this way. Let's do it this way. And it's easy with the COVID-19. They all know the risks. They all know when they leave their house they could get it. Why are we worried about it? Go ahead, have that game, have that season, have that practice, have this, have that. Anybody who shows up, they know what they're getting themselves into, and if they don't want it, they can stay home and hide under the bed. So, and I say that, Chris, because there's a push in some states to provide immunity. Immunity.
Right.
So you can't get sued.
Well, that's what I was going to say.
So
the old waiver conversation.
No, well, before we even get to the waiver.
Yeah.
Because the waiver's not going anywhere.
Yeah.
The thing that college football players need to be concerned about is immunity. Because if the government comes in and says you can't sue, it doesn't matter if you signed a waiver or not.
Gotcha.
You can't sue.
The
guardrails are gone.
Right.
We're giving them a favor here.
Pass.
We're taking the guardrails off.
Yeah, that's interesting.
So that could happen.
Right. That's an interesting aspect. Certainly. Well, I think that plays into this specific scenario though is ACC, SEC, certainly mostly states that seem to be a little bit more forgiving when it comes to the pandemic, or whatever you want to say, but certainly not as strict as far as what we have learned from the CDC guidelines and all those type of things. Yeah, that's been going down in that part. So maybe those are states that will back that up. I mean, we brought this up yesterday, but again, the old Miss governor didn't say anything about masks until he realized there might not be college football, and he said, I want everybody to start wearing masks because I want to watch college football this year. So that just tells you the state of mind. And, of course, that is a huge part of their culture down there, and I understand that money is playing into this and everything like that. There is a lot of aspects here, but, yeah, you got to do it safe. You got to do it right. I don't know, Mike. I mean, I will say this. I'm continuing to be encouraged by, of course, the bubble leagues in basketball and hockey. But, Major League Baseball, not a bubble, doing pretty damn well. The NFL certainly seems, I know
except
we
the
have
Cardinals.
Except the Cardinals, right? But, then the NFL, I think things are looking pretty good so far, too. I know we haven't started tackling and hitting and doing all that, but, those should be things I do think the SEC and ACC could look at to go, wait, they're managing this. They're making it somewhat, doable, and let's see where it goes. I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but, there's some examples out there of it going in the right direction at least.
Here's the kinds of things that you may hear from various states, and this was a quote recently from Tennessee Lieutenant Governor Randy McNally, a Republican from Oak Ridge.
I think I heard
the last thing small business owners, pastors, doctors, and school superintendents need to worry about are frivolous lawsuits which would further impede their ability to do their jobs in this difficult time. Well, okay, but what about the lawsuits that have merit? That's the thing. You enter into this immunity discussion under the guise of saying we don't want these organizations to be the subject of frivolous lawsuits, but you take off the guardrails, you let them do whatever they want,
right.
and you're wiping out the possibility of merit-based lawsuits being potentially filed to get fair compensation when someone does something they shouldn't have done.
Yeah, like
so,
the employer
Tennessee
lets 5
taking up-
guys in the door that day that have COVID-19. He just says, "I don't care," and then somebody comes down with it. And yet, in your scenario there, you're saying small business is going to be protected, and that's not right because he's being careless and, of course, endangering other people.
Well, consider the grocery stores that are even though, and I know people are going to think this is political, but it's ridiculous to call it political. It's factual. You know, if you would try to walk into a grocery store without a shirt on or without shoes on or carrying an open container of beer, they'd tell you to get the hell out.
Yeah.
You walk in without a mask on, even if it's mandated in the local jurisdiction, they won't say anything to you.
Yeah.
You walk in and the mask is hanging down under your nose, they won't say anything to you. You're, going down the aisle and you decide you've had enough of the mask for now and you pull it down under your chin, which I think is funny. Like, hey, I have a mask, I just don't happen to have it covering my mouth and my nose.
Right.
Nobody says anything to you. And, that's having that potential for liability is the kind of thing that gets businesses to choose short-term doing the right thing because long-term they may end up with a major problem. So we'll see how that plays out. And you mentioned the concept of waiver.
Yeah.
And we've seen people in the media, and there are people in the media who want college football to go forward because they want college football to go forward for their own selfish interests, suggesting the idea that college football players should just sign a waiver. Just sign away your rights. That's the flip side to immunity. Hey, just sign away your rights. Just do whatever you have to do. Put your name on the bottom line so you can't sue, and go ahead and step into that petri dish of COVID-19 and give it to your grandma, and maybe grandma dies. It's amazing to me that, number one, people who are affiliated with major networks would make that argument. Number two, the major networks would let them. It's the height of irresponsibility to pressure kids into signing a waiver. The only good news is the NCAA said last week there will be no waivers signed by student athletes at our member institutions.
Yeah.
Period.
Good. Well, I think that's safe. They got to do their job and to protect these kids. And, as everything you've just said, there's just so much unknown. And yeah, there could be that day where, and I'm not rooting for this and surely hope it never happens, but yeah, that some football player does get COVID-19 and it has, the bad long-term effects somewhere 6-7 years down the road. We start to learn that, COVID-19 did this to the nervous system or did this to the brain, and then what are you going to go? Oh, well, you signed a waiver. Sorry. So, okay, yeah, it's unknown right now. So the NCAA, good for them for protecting the players a little bit in this case.
Isn't it amazing that one of the saddest footnotes of this crazy time we live in is that it's now perfectly acceptable to point a finger at someone who dares to engage in the attempt to apply foresight to a situation and identify worst-case scenarios as someone who is actually rooting for the worst-case scenarios to happen. That we're only mentioning this because we want to see it all burn. That is beyond ridiculous. It is a sad statement as to where we've arrived as a society.
Right.
That those who would bother to say, hang on a second, there may be a problem with this, right? There may be an issue here. That those people just get ignored and get shouted down. It's like the guy in Jurassic Park. Who's the guy? The guy that Jeff Goldblum, whatever character he was in Jurassic Park.
Yes, right.
The guy trying to tell him,
you
hey,
can't control
folks,
life.
these dinosaurs are going to eat everybody eventually.
Right.
And I'm not saying it because I want to see people get eaten by dinosaurs. I'm saying it because I hope to avoid that outcome.
Right.
That's what, and now if you do that as it relates to COVID-19, people think you just want to see college football burn and the NFL burn and people get COVID-19 so we can say, I told you so. It's ridiculous, Chris.
Well,
and it's exhausting.
Well, it just, as you said, it feeds into what our country is right now. The narcissism, fed by social media and everybody being a know-it-all and everything like that. Yeah, we've lost our way that way. It's where our country's been flipped upside down. I hope we can straighten it out, but you're right. It's all about, me. My thought. It's more important. I know. I'm not a doctor. I've never been in a hospital before, but I'm going to tell you how you should approach the coronavirus. Hey, Chris Simms, I've never seen an NFL football player in person before, but I'm telling you this quarterback's better than that quarterback. I've never seen one in person, and I don't know anything about it. And I'm a plumber, but I'm going to tell you, you're a stupid idiot with 4-letter words and blah, 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 and your family sucks, but your rankings suck, and that's just the way we are right now, and it's insane. It's insane.
I remember when I was a kid and I first became aware of the saying, eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we shall die. And I thought, that is incredibly morbid, right?
Yeah.
But you know what? That attitude is what's driving all of this. Just do what you want today. We'll worry about tomorrow.
Hi, I'm Mike Tirico, and thanks for watching. Make sure to hit subscribe for the latest news and highlights from NBC Sports.